welcome to a special edition of the Darden Admissions Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. In this episode of the podcast, we're excited to share another installment from our ongoing Women at Darden event series, a conversation featuring Mandy Lozano, a member of UVA Darden's full-time MBA class of 2009, and Senior Assistant Dean for Admissions, Donna Clark. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. As always, if this conversation is helpful for you, please like this episode and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an update. And remember, you can always check the episode description for links to Darden blogs, social channels, and more. And now, without further ado, here's an installment from our Women at Darden event series featuring Mandy Lozano and Donna Clark.
I am so excited to welcome alumna and Darden Foundation Trustees member Mandy Lozano, who is a Darden grad from the class of '09. She's going to offer insights on her experience at Darden over 15 years and working in large manufacturing, consumer goods, and retail industries. One of the things that I loved as I researched her background is the pivots that she'd made in her career and the theme of reinvention, which I think is so fascinating. She's done some really interesting things in a multitude of industries. She currently lives in Seattle with her 3 cats, Doug, Blanche, and Boo Boo, and was on grounds in the fall for both the annual Board of Trustees meetings and the groundbreaking on Darden's new student housing, as well was a keynote speaker for our annual Women's Symposium and Diversity Conference. Fun fact, Mandy used to be a globally ranked bicycle racer, and we're going to ask her about that. I've read a lot about that element of her background. It's so fascinating. And Mandy, I believe this is your first time on the Women at Darden Office Hour series, so a big welcome. And to all of you joining us, you're in for such a big treat. Welcome, Mandy.
Thank you, Donna. It's great to be here. I'm sad to report Bobo the cat of my 3, he absconded to my neighbors. He got tired of living at my house and he adopted my neighbors. Everyone who has cats knows how this goes. They choose you. You don't choose them. So we're down to 2.
Visit each other.
Yeah. They can look at each other through the window. Yeah, he wasn't happy at my house, so he went elsewhere.
Yeah, maybe 3 was just too many for him.
Yeah, he's kind of a one-man show. So he went next door.
So everyone, I'm going to ask Mandy a little bit about her experience before Darden, and then a lot about the Darden experience. And then she also has a very fascinating background after Darden. But let's get started with your background before Darden. Could you tell everybody, just an overview of your background before you chose Darden?
Sure. Well, I know some of you all, as you meet one another and meet other folks who've gone to business school, some will say like, yeah, I had a degree that wasn't particularly useful for business. And I think I'm sort of top ranked in that. I have a degree in art. So like, I'm a gifted artist. It was sort of genetic. Both of my parents were artists and art teachers who later became cattle ranchers, which is another story, but it was kind of never a question that I would get an art degree. So, but as many of you may know, it's very tough to find a job when you have an art degree. So I got a minimum wage job out of college working at a jewelry company, thinking that I would become like a designer. But I ended up falling in love with the management side of things. And I ended up actually at a very young age being in charge of like quite a large team of jewelry assemblers. And I was in charge of inventory and shipping and production. So it was a really fascinating thing that I just sort of fell into. And then that turned into a job actually running another jewelry company. And then I moved out to the Southeast. So I'm from the West Coast, but I moved out to the Southeast, followed an ex out to get his PhD at North Carolina State University. And I fell into a job at Burt's Bees, which many of you, especially probably domestic students, know. It's the world's best lip balm.
I have some in my cabinet.
As you should. The quintessential yellow tube. And I was in operations and production because I had experience in manufacturing. But then I met the CEO, the new CEO. So the company was sold to a private equity firm when I was there. And he met me and he said, Mandy, you're a marketer. And I was like, what's that? I didn't even know what that is. And so he gave me a role in marketing and I had no clue what I was doing. And it became very clear to me that I had one peer and also the CEO, they had MBAs. And they had this way of being effective and thinking about business that I just was not equipped. I just did not have the background or the exposure. So I knew I had to get an MBA. So that
that's what led you.
Yeah.
Okay. And before we talk about Darden, I have to ask,
Yeah.
do you still, are you still an artist? And what kind of art did you specialize in?
Oh, wow. Okay. So yeah, so I'm more of a 2-dimensional than a 3D, though I'm pretty good at throwing pots and I'm a great seamstress.
That's
Yeah.
a great skill.
Yeah, well, yeah, my mother was an amazing seamstress, like made her own wedding dress and everything.
Wow.
Yeah, so yeah, but I'm more skilled at 2D. So like lithography, watercolor, etchings, pen and ink, charcoal. So painting, oil or acrylic. Yeah. I don't do it much anymore, Donna. I'm quite spoiled, and I was used to having like a big studio since both my parents were artists. I had quite a nice space to do it, and I haven't really made that for myself. However, I pour my creative energy into my home. I actually, I have a 1900 Victorian, which to some people from other countries doesn't sound old, but it is old for the West Coast.
Right. And
I
probably
renovated
character.
Yeah, and like all of my art's original from, friends of family or myself or whatever. But I rent it out for movies, TV series, photo shoots, etc. I rent it out to Amazon, Google, the BBC, you name it. And it's really cool. And people really love the space, and it has great light, as you can see. So that's like kind of my creative outlet right now.
Creative outlet. Yeah, I was just really curious. That's so fascinating. Okay, so you made the decision that you wanted to pursue an MBA. What led you to select Darden? And when you were going through that process, I guess that would have been in like 2006.
06. Yeah, so it was a while ago. Yeah, I think I took like the last GMAT that wasn't virtual or something like that. So I didn't know anything about business schools. I remember I told my parents I wanted an MBA, and my mom had an MFA, and my parents were like, "What is that?" And so I had to explain that to them. But I knew that I wanted to be able to learn in a very immersive way, and the case method became something that I learned about, and I thought, "Wow, that's really intriguing." And then I also wanted to go to a really, really great school, because I did understand that the doors that are opened by top-ranked schools are different than perhaps others. And I wanted to really change my life and step up in my career. And I knew that a very well-known and well-reputed program, as well as a really interesting method of learning, would help me with that. And that also would have some empathy for the fact that I wasn't like technically ready. I did have to take some accounting classes before I went, which is great. I'm very glad I did that. So Darden just felt like the right place. And I must say too, Donna, when I walked on campus for my interview, which actually almost 19 years to the day from when I did it, I just had a feeling. It just felt like the right place to me. Yeah. I even like went and sat in a section before they were starting class. I didn't know. I just like went and talked to some students, and I just felt at home.
That's great.
That's how I decided.
Yeah, good. And I hear that frequently from people. I think trusting your instincts about how you feel about the community and the extent to which you're welcomed and you can see yourself there, or there's a good fit, is so important. You mentioned a moment ago that you were kind of interested in the case method, and case method, peer-based learning are hallmarks of the Darden experience. Can you elaborate a little bit? Because this is a lot of people haven't been exposed to the case method yet, right? And as human beings, it's very natural to be a little apprehensive of what we don't know. Can you talk a little bit about the adjustment, given your background, to the case method, and how you think it positions future business leaders?
So I think humans, we are genetically inclined to be collaborative. We're social beings. And the collaborative nature of the case method was really appealing. Also learning from peers. I mean, now by the time I arrived at Darden, I'd been in the working world, with the exception of my little pro bike racing stint, for 8 years. And so I knew that you don't really get things done by decree. You have to work across and up and down to get things done in companies. And so that the case method was a little bit metaphorical of that. And also what I learned later, which I didn't fully understand until I sat in my first section C, when I started, was just how intimidating it could be, but then how important your voice was. And every single person in my section, in any class I had, their voice really mattered. And the professors, which, as you all know, are some of the best in the world, consistently #1 for, I don't know, Donna, how many years we got this streak going. And
Yeah.
they're
Too many to keep
amazing.
track of.
I know, right? It's just an embarrassment of riches on the rankings. And so they're amazing at drawing out perspectives from students, maybe some who aren't as inclined to speak. We all know sometimes women are less likely to do so, and they're just masterful at that and trying that out. Now, I didn't know that before I went, but the inclination of like collaboration, and I was a team sport athlete my whole life. And so I understood and loved the team aspect. And I always loved, the team aspect of my workplaces too. So it just felt like a good fit. And it can be intimidating, but I just firmly believe it's so, so, so good.
It's so interesting that you say you were a team athlete. Years ago, a marketing professor at Darden, did a study looking at what in an application correlates with long-term success. And unfortunately, they had to quantify success by financial success because it's hard to quantify other forms of success. But this was a study done, a good 20 years ago, and participation in athletics was the number one correlator. So it's interesting, sort of the parallels between team sports and, as you mentioned, collaboration about Darden in careers. So.
Yeah, definitely. And for those maybe who are on the call who haven't necessarily participated in sports, I'm sure there's other things that maybe you have done that have really brought that out in you, but I totally agreed on it. It's quite apparent, like in the workplaces I've been in since I graduated, just how clear some folks who did have some like robust athletic experience do very, very well.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it applies for other team-oriented activities too.
Yeah, productions of plays.
Yes, exactly.
An actor, or yeah.
Yeah, so many opportunities to collaborate in those types of activities. You mentioned Darden's longstanding reputation for the best educational experience, which we're so proud of. And the other thing that Darden is so well known for is just the strong sense of community. Kind of maybe alluded to that when you came and visited and just had a feeling about it. Can you talk about your experience with the sense of community at Darden? Anything that stands out in terms of your community experience?
Yeah, well, I met my tribe there. That's where I met the people who I felt the most at home with all of my life. It was the place I felt the most myself and the most accepted and welcome, and valued,
That's
and
beautiful.
all those things. So yes, and I found that with women, our class was about, I want to say, a third women. And I was very close, ended up being very close with the women. I'm sure some of you on the call have heard about our learning team setup, which you're chosen to be in learning teams that come from each section. And it's kind of magical how that happens. And I'm still very close today with Meredith, who was on my learning team with me. She lives in Minnesota now. So the female, just the way we kind of naturally form community sort of wherever we are was really, really great. But also some of my best male friends are from there as well. I know that clubs evolve over time, but we had a really robust marketing club, like some other clubs too that I wasn't necessarily involved in. I was also involved in LASA, which I don't know what it is today, Donna, but Latin American students.
Yes, it's still LASA.
Yeah, awesome. And then I was also co-chair of, I think it's now called Pride at Darden. Before it was called GLAD.
Oh, right.
Lesbians and Allies at Darden. And now we've added some more letters, which is beautiful. And I was co-chair of that. And that was a really, really wonderful thing to be a part of as well. So I naturally found community, but I can honestly say that I care very much for every single person that I went to school. There are 321 people, I think, in my class, and I have an affection for every single one of them. Everyone was just, they're all, humans are just gifts to one another. And I just loved, they were all so unique and interesting. And I was kind of a de facto member of the crew from India. I felt really welcome in that group as well. I have some really wonderful lifelong friends from folks who were raised in India. In fact, I was just at dinner last night with a friend from Gujarat. So anyway,
nice.
It was just wonderful. But you get out what you put in. So like being open to it is really important.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like you got so much out of it. You mentioned a little bit earlier, you referred to women and finding their voice. Can you talk a little bit about how you think the case method in particular is beneficial to women?
Sure. Well, I think women are naturally very gifted strategic thinkers. So they consider all manner of inputs and not always having to see linearly. And they're very, the word multitask, I don't know if it's popular to use these days, but anyway, women are very good multitaskers, I believe.
I believe that too.
Yeah. So our ability to take in disparate pieces of information and kind of decide like what's important and what's not and not get too distracted, I think is a really great gift that women often have. And so their ability to point out things that maybe aren't so blatantly obvious that are necessarily important in solving a case like we do in class, I think is a really wonderful strong suit. And professors, again, mentioning our professors, are so good at drawing people out and bringing those perspectives to the forefront. Because generally I've found that more often than not, it wasn't necessarily women who were first raising their hands. Now, after a while in section, you began to get more courageous. So maybe more so toward the end of a class,
Right.
a quarter, a semester, you would find that. But, initially it wasn't always that way. But I think women had a gift of sitting back and being like, wait a minute, but what about this thing? And then that thing ended up being the thread that leads the class to the conclusion of solving the case. So I think they're very gifted at that and noticing. I think women are extremely good at noticing a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to prospective students who are joining us today? What do you wish you had known at this stage when you were sort of embarking on an MBA or choosing an MBA program? Any advice about what you wish you had known?
One is, it sounds so trite, and you all have already heard this, but I'm going to just tell you again. Be yourself, because that's what Darden wants. That's what any school you apply to. Maybe you don't end up coming to Darden, but being yourself and trying to be as close to who you really are and trying to, try to limit the, what my mom thinks or what my best friend thinks or what. Just trying to focus on who you are and what you want is so important because it shows up, right? And it shows up in your interview and your application and in your class interactions. And that will be the most rewarding. And you are enough. You really are. There's only one like you. There's only one of me. There's only one Donna. There's only one Haley. And you have something really unique to offer, and don't shy away from that. And maybe a school doesn't want it, and that's okay too. But I'm just really just bring who you are to the table. And know that you're going to change. Donna, you mentioned reinvention and evolution.
Yes. Yeah. We're going to talk about how you have reinvented your.
Yeah. But we want you. We want you.
Yes.
You're I'm looking at the chat. Rosemary from Ghana. We want to hear who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. That sense of authenticity. It's so easy. There's nothing I think more joyful in my job than reading essays and getting a sense oh, I really got to know this person, and every person uniquely can contribute in different ways. So I think that's such great advice. And, to maybe spend some time thinking before you're applying about what is it about your characteristics, your background, your talents that you're most proud of that are relevant to the business school experience that you can convey.
In addition to that, Donna, ask your peers about
Yes.
that. I went on this wonderful journey about a year or two ago where I asked former bosses, what makes me so good? Or what are the things that really stand out about me that are really unique? And why not? It's also a confidence boost.
Yes.
Something to say. So yeah, ask people closest to you. My sister helped me edit some of my essays. And it was awesome to work with my sister, who's obviously known me my whole life. So yeah. Also, the folks around you know you and notice things that maybe you don't even think about or see. So yeah, leverage them too as you're getting ready. Anyway, sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah. So switching gears just a little bit. You spent some time in Charlottesville, and you're back in Charlottesville because you're so involved. We'll talk about your role as a trustee in a little bit. But what are some of your favorite things about Charlottesville? We have people joining us today from all over the world who aren't familiar with Charlottesville. What are some of your favorite things about Charlottesville?
Oh, it is so beautiful. So I was raised on a cattle ranch in Southern Oregon in the Cascade Mountains, right by Crater.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I've got a pretty high bar for beauty, but it is magical. You're there in the Shenandoah and the Blue Ridge, and oh my gosh, it just has this magic to it that it's beautiful any season. It's just so gorgeous. So aesthetically, it's wonderful just to be there and take it in. And as a visual artist, that's kind of my jam. But also the food is fantastic. I found folks from Albemarle County to be really delightful and interesting, folks who live there all the time and aren't just in the schools. And that's really cool too. The access to other things, you can get to Asheville, which is one of my favorite towns in the Southeast. You can get to DC, obviously. You can go to skiing in Snowshoe, West Virginia, if you want to drive a ways. So there's a lot of access you have as well. So it was just awesome. It's not a big city. So if someone's seeking like a big city experience, that's not it. But it's just a delightful place to just be.
Yeah. And I'm glad you get to come back fairly frequently and
yes.
enjoy
Yes,
all of that. As an aside, Mandy mentioned the restaurants in Charlottesville. We have 335, and Rand McNally rated it a couple years ago the #1 foodie town in the country. So it's one of the things that I like about Charlottesville too.
My favorite is the local, which I'd probably not, or Moss, right? Moss.
Moss is great too. Yeah, those two good ones. You give back to the school in so many ways. As a trustee, you were just a speaker at the Women's Symposium. What motivated you to get involved with the school at this level?
Well, a few things. One, I felt extremely privileged to have been a part of the community and to get an MBA from Darden. So I felt an obligation to support the school that had given me so much. It really helped change the trajectory and success in my career. So that's one. Two, it's sort of like democracy. You have to show up and, use your voice. And so I have a voice about how I hope the school evolves over time. And I made that clear. And as a result, I've been able to be more involved, being on the board of trustees, the Darden Foundation. I don't know if folks on the call know much about what it does, but the school is not able to support itself on tuition alone. And so the foundation is a piece of it is fundraising. So we raise funds to help give scholarships to students to help keep the school current and amazing and, grant. I don't know, there's all these mechanics of it, but it's an awesome thing that really helps to shape the long-term future of what Darden is. So I felt inclined to be a part of that. And again, I do have a very strong sense of obligation to give back to the place that gave me so much. And I know we all have a lot of things we can do with our money and our time, but the Darden MBA has transformed my life. And as you hear Donna all the time, transform, that's like the word. And it's so true. And most alums will say that, but it has truly transformed my life. So why wouldn't I give back to the thing that did this for me? It's a huge, and it's in my will. And like Darden is a huge part of what the mark I want to leave on the world. And you guys help make it happen. So I know that folks, the world sometimes feels like it's becoming much more self-centered. But I just hope we all kind of pick our heads up and realize just how much a part of a broader community we are and the things that matter. We should really be investing our time and money in.
Well, thank you so much for all you do for Darden in so many ways. And what a great story about how impactful it has been for you and the desire to contribute and give back and continue to ensure Darden's success. One of the things that I found so fascinating about your background as I was researching you to prepare for this, you have made several pivots in your career. I think there's a really fascinating theme of reinvention. You've worked at top companies like PepsiCo, Starbucks, Burt's Bees, as you mentioned, Nestle. You were a professional bicycle racer. You founded your own consultancy. How did Darden prepare you for those kinds of career opportunities and the ability to make those pivots? And also then after that, I'm going to ask, I'll ask that general question. And then I'd love for people to hear kind of your trajectory since Darden, since it's so interesting.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So generally, I think I've been prepared for these things because the Darden case method, I think, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we talked about, we did like 600 cases in our career at Darden. So the sheer volume of business cases, so business situations that you read about, some of which are fictitious, but a lot of which are real. These business cases that you read about and your ability to take in the information, figure out, again, like I was mentioning earlier, figure out what's important, figure out what's not, figure out how to solve a problem, understand the outcome, those kinds of things. When you do that over and over and over, your ability to see business situations, or I mean, beyond business, right? Just situations, and be able to think strategically about them and understand how you can solve problems, or even like defining the problem, as we know, sometimes hard to do. That you get so much confidence with the Darden case method, because you just have a lot of reps, right? So anyone knows, the whole like 10,000 hours, I think that's like a Malcolm Gladwell thing. Like if you do 10,000 hours to something, you will be an expert at it or whatever.
Right,
And that's a testament to that, right? Like I didn't just fall out of bed one day and become a pro bike racer. I devoted a lot of time. As I say, it takes forever to become an overnight success. So the repetition and the sheer volume of things that you do during the Darden time period is critical in establishing your confidence and your critical thinking skill set. And that has enabled me to say to myself, okay, I was not educated in the time of artificial intelligence, for example, but that doesn't mean that I can't understand the world that is now something that it's a huge part of. I have the critical thinking skills to be able to, through all of these like years and years and years of cases that have been written that show, they're about things that happened in the 60s, the 70s, last year, right? There's such a huge volume of business cases that really help you see and be able to frame what you're seeing. And it's not necessarily about what is happening today, what's topical, but you're able to see patterns and you're able to understand, okay, so this AI thing is this kind of phenomena. And I know from the Harvard business case, 2001, about the S curve of maturation of industries. I know where we are, right? So the ability to frame that gives me the confidence. Like, for example, I am consulting for Weyerhaeuser right now. Yes, I grew up on a cattle ranch that had timber, and I grew up in a logging town. So I understand timber, but I've never worked in the timber industry. But I'm helping them with strategic planning for sustainability. I'm able to come in and assess things because of my Darden background, and then all the work experience I've gotten since then. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And you mentioned cycling a few times. I read this really interesting article and about you. And in the article, they asked, what leadership and management lessons did you learn from cycling? Can you talk a little bit about your cycling days? When was it? And like, tell them first a little bit about your life as a professional cycler. And then I'd love to for them to hear what I read about you, about what you took away in terms of relevant leadership and management lessons.
Sure. So I actually, when I was admitted to Darden, I was not a pro officially. Yeah, it wasn't my full-time job. I got admitted. So I had my interview, which is almost 19 years to the day. And then I got a call, like literally, I want to say a few weeks later, from a professional team. And they asked me if I wanted to race for them full-time. And I did not know if I'd gotten into Darden. And I was like, So here's the moral of the story. Say yes. So I thought, well, okay, this is a once in a lifetime thing. I'm going to do it. I was an extremely good bike racer, but I didn't really imagine that it would be. I knew that, I wanted to go into business and do all that, but I was like, ooh, what a cool opportunity. So I deferred my admission. So I waited a year. So then I raced my bike basically for 2 years. And then I like rolled in. I did nothing with like this. I mean, you pre-Zoom, I did nothing with the school before I showed up because I was racing my bike.
Right.
And plus I didn't really have money. So I didn't do anything before Darden, and I rolled in and I knew one person, and that's it. And I had a great time. So anyway, so the pro bike racing, it just kind of randomly happened. I only got into cycling in my 20s. Like I mentioned, I was a team sport. I mean, cycling's a team sport, but I was a ball sport athlete. I like walked onto the basketball team in college. I was highly recruited to play volleyball, actually, by Division I programs when I was in high school. So I was a very gifted athlete there. But it was fun to fall into cycling. It happened in my 20s, and then I got really good really quick. It's a genetic thing too. I have a certain affinity for it, but you don't get there without hard work. So
Sure.
Your question about some of the things that I've learned, I mean, just the idea of working really, really hard and setting goals and like being comfortable with failure, because statistically, pro bike racer or just bike racers, you win very seldom. You don't win a lot of races. And so you have to just keep going. So just that perseverance and the setting the goals and like setting micro goals, to work up to like a certain plateau in your training, et cetera. I mean, just the sheer work ethic. And then Darden, used to be known as boot camp. So the work ethic, again, was needed. So that actually wasn't too tough for me when I got there because I wasn't probably why I was admitted, but it nevertheless really equipped me for what I saw when I got there.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because in this article that I read, one of the aspects of it is that I think a lot of people think of cycling as an individual sport, but you talked about how team oriented it was, especially given your role on the team.
Yes, absolutely. And actually that has been such a huge through line for me as well, which, so to those of you who don't, I won't give you a primer, but Google it, or ask ChatGPT or whatever. But it is absolutely a team sport and it's all about energy, expenditure and conservation. So my job was what's called a domestique, DOMESTIQUE. It's a French word. And my job was to be the worker bee. When I was a pro, I mean, before then I was winning and stuff like that. But once you're at the top, everyone has their roles.
Right.
I don't really know the metaphor in another sport. I can't really think of one necessarily. I guess like point guard to a degree in basketball, because you're not scoring the baskets all the time, but you're with the assists, if you will. So you work super, super hard to make sure that your chosen winner, depending on the kind of race that it is as fresh as possible toward the end of the race so that they don't expend any energy, but you do. So your finish doesn't matter. And that's a really interesting metaphor for work as well. And that's team player. It's not all about me and my victory and my accolades. I work so hard for my team and I don't necessarily need the credit. If you need me to shine, there were races where I was supposed to win because it was best suited for me. And I did. And I can do that. And you want to put me on the stage and make me a keynote or whatever, happily do it. Also happily work behind the scenes to make sure that whomever I'm working for with is successful. So yeah, so it gave me the ability to like take my moments and then also work really hard, sort of unrecognized. And that was okay with me. And I've done that a lot in my career. I love empowering other people. It's so fun.
I interrupted you. You said something about people.
Oh, I just love empowering other people to be successful. That's how I apply, my horizontal team, but also people who work for me. I really love it.
Yeah, that's just a wonderful philosophy. How lucky for the people who work for you. Can you tell us a little bit? Can you give people an overview of your journey after Darden? Professionally, it's so interesting. And again, everyone, one of the things I found so interesting about Mandy is just the theme of reinvention. It's so exciting. And I don't know if you've read this, Mandy, but I go to a lot of conferences and about career trends and things, and this generation that is thinking about an MBA is expected to make more dramatic career transitions than previous generations. So in the past, like that's a little bit of an anomaly, right? So much reinvention, but this generation is expected to make a lot of career pivots. And so I think anything you can share about, your career trajectory, and I want to dig into the reinvention theme too, but let's first give them an overview of like what your career has been since Darden.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated in 2009, so 16 years. And I went, I'd been in marketing at Burt's Bees. I didn't really know what I was doing, but, I was like, yeah, I seem to be good at this, right? Sorry, someone keeps calling me. I don't know what about. Anyway, so I knew I wanted to be better at marketing because it was something, I had an affinity for. And so we have, as you know, Darden has great relationships with so many employers. PepsiCo, actually, the former CEO of PepsiCo is a Darden grad, Steve Reinemund, great guy who also like made himself available to little old me, but wonderful man. Anyway, so I went to PepsiCo. I was so impressed with their culture of excellence and what I found later, extremely rigorous, and I loved it. And so I went to Dallas to the PepsiCo, to the Frito-Lay division of PepsiCo, so snacks. That was incredible. I did not love Dallas, but I really enjoyed the experiences I got there, and it made me a super strong. So marketing at PepsiCo is a GM/CEO training ground, and Darden's a general management school, and it really did help deliver on that. So just kind of continued that. So I had an amazing time at PepsiCo. Got to work on some of the funnest brands. But sadly, my father was diagnosed with mesothelioma, which is a cancer from asbestos exposure, and That would happen when I'd been at PepsiCo for about 5 years, and I knew it was time to come home to the West Coast so I could be closer to him toward the end of his life. So it was either Nike or Starbucks. Starbucks called me back first, and I got a great job at Starbucks. So I moved to Seattle in 2014, and glad I did, because about 8 months later, so my father passed away, but I got to be with him in his final months. So that was really important to me.
Yeah.
But my Starbucks time was really amazing. You know, again, I went from PepsiCo is a very values-driven company and really, really all about excellence. And then I went to Starbucks, which is extremely values-driven, not an MBA culture, not terribly quantitatively driven at the time. And I was in marketing, but I didn't love it. And so I ended up going into corporate strategy. So basically management consulting. And thank God, because Darden prepares you for that. Because as you know, we're like a top consulting school. So I'd been prepared. So I was extremely successful in strategy. That was where all the lights went on for me. It was super rigorous. Darden prepared me for that. It's extremely rigorous school. I got to do tons of analytics. I got to work on massive projects. We joked that if it didn't have 3 commas, we weren't going to work on it, right? It had to be in the billions in terms of value and impact. So it was awesome. And I really got my C-suite velvet touch down. So I did projects for Howard Schultz, and he actually listened to me when I told him, like, no, you shouldn't buy this company. Here's why. I did some analysis, and it was awesome. And it really trained me to have so much confidence in my perspective. I, as a result of that experience, have never been hesitant about being in the presence of any leader and telling them what I think, or what I think the situation is, or what my recommendation is. It gave me utmost confidence, built upon by my Darden degree. So after Starbucks, so then I wanted to be head of strategy for a division of Starbucks. They had 4. I was head of strategy for one of them. Nestle bought our division. So then I went to the world's biggest food and beverage company. It was very different. Nestle is not Starbucks. It was okay. I got an interesting experience, but I knew that I wanted to do more. And so I got an awesome opportunity to be the chief marketing officer for a housewares company. This really great company called Mirror, and it's a very values-driven company. They donate quite a lot of revenue to charitable causes. So I was in charge of the entire marketing part. And mind you, I had not been in marketing for a few years. And so, as we all know, marketing has evolved immensely. And so I had to learn it again, because it was so much more digital than when I was in it before. And so I had to relearn all this stuff. And I had a great team of very passionate people. They didn't necessarily have the background or training that I was used to, but it was an awesome opportunity for me to be able to help people reach goals and expectations that I set for them that seemed maybe initially a little bit too high. But it was an awesome time for me to really use that touch that I have with folks. Again, back to my passion for helping people succeed. And I didn't want people on my team who didn't want to be there or try to be the best that they could be. And I consider it an obligation, if someone doesn't want to be there, help them find something different. It wasn't a major part of my job, but nevertheless, it was so important to me that the people working for me really felt like they were growing and learning. And I set that culture on my team, and it was awesome. But then I was kind of tapped out. I was ready for a CEO role. Wasn't going to happen at Mirror, which is totally fine. And so I went and started my own consultancy, kind of keeping my options open, keeping my industries fresh. I worked in a variety of things. And then I ended up being hired by one of my clients. And so I did my first stint as a startup. So I checked the box. I'd be like, okay, world's biggest food and beverage company, check. Worked in a lot of interesting CPG, worked in retail, never worked at a startup. So I worked at a startup. It was a beverage technology. Yeah. Anyway, it was fine. I learned that I'm not a startup person. But anyway, that I was just able to use a lot of the skills that I'd gotten at Darden and then everything subsequent to make me as effective as possible. But they ran out of money to pay someone like me. So I'm still on the board, but I'm not involved anymore. But yeah, so that was tough, because it wasn't about me. But it's tough to be unemployed when you're in, your 40s. And so then I fired back up the consultancy and it's been a really rough, as I'm sure folks can attest to, it's been a really, really rough employment market. And so back to the reinvention. So I've had to ask myself, okay, what have I done that has me ready for this new world that we're all in, where AI is a big part of the conversation, et cetera. So I've benefited greatly from my contacts at Darden. Dave Lacrosse, who has funded the Lacrosse Institute, I have his cell number. He's made himself available to me for when I want to talk about AI things and the themes he sees in the industries I've been in. So you have a wonderful network at Darden of people who will help you prepare for what that next stage is. And so here I am. So but again, because of my ability to see things that aren't so much about the technical today topical, but like the themes of industries and evolution, I think has enabled me to, find this contract work at Weyerhaeuser, for example, where I can help them with their sustainability strategy, having never worked in it, but nevertheless bring tools, frameworks, mindsets to the table to really help them achieve what they want.
And I would imagine, given all the different industries you've worked in and roles, that when you start your own consultancy, then you're very attractive because
Yeah.
you've got like this assortment, this portfolio that's very broad. What is the nature of your consultancy? Is there is it strategy or what is the nature of it?
Yes. So strategy. So for sure, like I've done sort of chief strategy officer fractional roles for various companies. I've also sometimes you're just someone that a CEO can talk to who's not in their company and they want to it's tough like when you're at the top to be vulnerable or admit you don't know something. And so it's nice to have someone who kind of knows the deal, who's there on the side. So there's a little bit of that. Done a bunch of deep analytics. So really trying to keep myself sharp on analytics. And then also really trying to keep myself sharp on the latest tactics of marketing and for example, we all know search is changing because of AI. What does that mean for the websites that you develop? How do you develop parallel websites? Ones that can be scraped by Google, ones that can be found by, AI bots or whatever they're called. I'm currently doing some marketing work for a chocolate company. And so I'm keeping myself current there. So I've done a variety of things on it. And what ends up happening, it's all referral. So I get people know me and then they refer someone, and that's how all of these things have happened. But I just always try to listen more than anything when I initially meet someone, so I can try to play back to them what I believe they might need.
Yeah. What characteristics within yourself? I mean, I think it's I'm really, really intrigued with the reinvention. And I would imagine that confidence is a big factor, the ability to say, hey, this isn't working. I want to switch and do something else. And the ability to know, hey, I can form a new network someplace else. What are some of the skills or characteristics about yourself that have enabled you to make so many interesting pivots and to reinvent yourself?
It's hard to separate things about myself versus experiences I've had that have formed it, right? But it's sort of almost like, what was I born with? Good question. Confidence has looked different. Like women, books have been written. It's a gazillion-dollar industry to help women be confident, right? So I'm not immune to some of those things. I've thought about dyeing my gray hair, but I decided not to. But it's hard to say. My desire to learn and I'm so curious. I'm so curious. And so I think that is something that enables me to engage with people, to learn from them, to learn how I can help them, like in any business setting, whether I'm a consultant or whether I'm in the company. So I think that's helped me a lot, the curiosity, which then turns into helping, then to the collaborative team thing, helping people solve problems and being really, helping them to find problems and then work to solve them in ways that don't leave, trails of bodies behind you, because there's many ways to do things. And the Darden way, from what I experienced, is not one to be brutal and to be unethical or to not at all value the people part of things. And so that's been helpful. My desire to make the world a better place and do it ethically is really, really big. It was huge when I was at Darden. It still is. Scott, the dean, is extremely passionate about that. Yet a tremendous amount of philanthropy that's focused on that. It's wonderful. So so I think my values that, and some of that happens because of how you're raised. Sometimes you get it through experiences you've had and you're like, I never want to be like that again. And you learn. So hopefully that's helpful. And you don't have to be born, you don't have to grow up off the grid on a cattle ranch in the middle of nowhere to get these attributes or to have two wonderful artist parents. That's not it. I think your life experiences ideally, give you some really good strength and conviction.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. We are at time, everyone, but Mandy, what an interesting background, and thank you so much for your time and sharing your experiences before Darden and the reasons you chose Darden and the highlights of your Darden experience and your really tremendous career since then. And again, thank you for all you do for Darden.
And that was an installment from our Women at Darden event series featuring Mandy Lozano and Donna Clark. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, and you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can reach at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. Until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.